Yeah, Dee just rebranded the chili cook-off the chili kickoff, which I think is brilliant, actually. So we should talk to that guy more about what we're doing around here. If you're indoctrinated into the dog pound when you're a young boy, when Bernie Kosar's slinging that sidearm, it's football talk. The rest of your life, you're disappointed. The rest of your life, because the Browns, believe it or not, are not playing today. And so you're left with two choices. If you're a Browns fan, there's only two real choices. Well, there were only two left. There were the Buffalo Bills, but that ended the way we expected that to end. And then there's the Detroit Lions. They are the Browns that are left. So I'm all for the Lions. This room is full of Niners people today. But we are a church that allows Niners people to come. So we're super, super excited about that. We're going to jump in today. I got to catch up on Dee's message last week, just looking at this idea of like habit and preparation and positioning our lives to follow Jesus. And so we're going to jump right in and we're going to explore what that could look like for us. And what I want to do, though, is just, you might be familiar with this image here or this idea, but in 1996, NASA sent the Mars Pathfinder to the little red planet, and it had on it something called the Sojourner rover. And this had like all state-of-the-art AI and technology to explore like we've never explored before. And so the rover would go around and execute little missions and report back to Earth all the things we found about our colonization of Mars. And it hasn't happened yet. But so what unfolds, though, is the Sojourner, despite all of its technology, it keeps kind of like struggling on its missions. It keeps finding like it's so far from Earth that it has to kind of take its cues from the mother base, the Pathfinder, and there's this delay of communication. And it starts to get confused because it has to make some decisions using its programming. It starts to get confused about what it's supposed to do and what it's not supposed to do. And so its missions began to struggle with something called priority inversion. I was reading about this week, and I'm like, oh, this fits into this conversation about what like a meaningful life looks like, what flourishing looks like. And now, computer science majors, all right, just put your pride away for a minute. I'm communicating this so a second grader can understand it. Also, the only way I understand it, okay? So priority inversion is when something less important gets in the way of something more important. And this is what was happening to the Sojourner. It would get a more important task from the Pathfinder, but it would also have to just adjust its wheels and go, well, I can't do both of those. So I'm going to do the one that's most important to me right now, but it was actually the less important task, and it began to struggle with priority inversion. Although it accomplished some incredible things, it was weighed down by this reality. But something else happened in this process as well. It would start to make progress in one task, and then another task would come in, and instead of completing the task, now listen to this, instead of completing the task it had in front of it, instead of accomplishing the priority it had set out to do, it would offload all the work it did and onload a new task to accomplish. And it started to cycle through this process. And so not only did it struggle with priority inversion, it started to do something called thrashing. Now, apparently this is computer terminology, but it's also like Carlos terminology. This is real life. Like, do you ever feel like you're thrashing through life? You're just like, you look at your life and you go, I'm using 100% of my processing power to decide what task to do next while making no progress. And so these two ideas, priority inversion and thrashing, we're going to put in front of us today as we have a conversation about pre-decision and as we have a conversation about devotion and how devotion can shape and direct and determine the direction of our lives. And if you're like me, then you'll find at times you get occupied. You get occupied moving things around. And you're moving so many things around, you look and you go, I'm not sure I'm doing any real things. I'm just moving things around. And so as we have our conversation today, just hold those two thoughts. Anytime throughout this morning, go, all right, priority inversion. Do I experience that? Thrashing. If someone who knows me well, would they look at me and go, you're thrashing today? Like maybe that's new language we should use with each other. All right, so someone that's important to you, if they're just, just say, hey, you're thrashing. Then leave the room because they're not going to respond well. And so let's go back and review real quick to catch us up to where we are. We have a few new folks today. I also want to remind us where this conversation started. In essence, we said pre-decision is about quality decisions, that these quality decisions will lead to a quality life. They'll help us avoid this priority confusion and the thrashing that can result. And I want to just take a moment before I move on and talk about something that kind of fits into this right here in the life of the church, and something that came out of a conversation we had back in May. So next Sunday, February the 5th, look, give me a second here. Chili kickoff. All right. I'm back in the zone. All right. So back in May, we did a conversation about like everyone is a gift with gifts. Everyone. Because you bear the thumbprint of God. And everyone is a gift with gifts to share. And as we were talking about that, one of our Eastlanders came to me and said, I feel like God's putting something on my heart. There's experience I have, and there's a passion I've experienced in life about living my faith out in my day-to-day job. This person's not a pastor, they don't work for a church. They just said, you know what I want to do? In light of the idea of taking the love of God out into the world, I'd love to put a group together of like-minded people who can explore what it looks like to follow Jesus in their vocation. And so when they were presented with this idea, when faced with this situation, I have pre-decided too, they thought about their work. And they said, when faced with the reality of my vocation and my passion for it, I pre-decided that I want to gather with a group of common-minded people and grow together. And so they came to me with the idea, they said, what if we started a Christian business leaders mentoring group? Now, keep in mind, this was May last year. All right, we move fast around here, okay? Because here we are, and just coming up, and you can scan the QR code, you can check it in the lobby, but we're going to be kicking this off on February 5th, okay? February 5th, so it's a Monday, it's in an evening, and it's a chance to come together, and here's what this is all about, okay? It's a space where you can gather with other people who are trying to follow Jesus and deepen their faith and relationship with him. But they go to work on Monday, or they go to work on Sunday afternoon, and they work all week long. And you can come together, and you can share common practice. You can peer mentor one another. You can look into what it means to lead, what it means to innovate, what it means to manage and empower others in their gifts and their skills. And you can say, what are you doing that's working well, and how's your faith informing this? And Brian, actually, who's kind of the mastermind behind this, he's sitting right up here. Brian and I talked about this. I said, so Brian, what if nobody shows up? He said, that's okay. We start small. So starting with one, but you can jump in there and you can say, you know what? I am working in the business sector. I am an entrepreneur. I am leading people. And it would be great to rub shoulders with folks who are asking questions about how does your faith shape and inform your practice? How can you be a better leader? How can we as a community shape and sharpen one another and bless one another so that the community is blessed? So this Christian business leaders, to me, is a picture of pre-decision. It's a picture of saying, because this doesn't just happen. This started in May. Brian pre-decided in May that the Lord was putting something on his heart. God was saying, Brian, do something. And here we are. We're launching it this year. I want to encourage you to take a look at that. And if you say, yeah, that is me. And not only do I have something to learn, I also have something to contribute. I have gifts. I'm a person with gifts, and I'm a person with gifts to share. And so when we think about how this shapes up, what I want to go to is our 6 pre-decision statements. So we went through, I am ready. And last week, Dee took us through, I am consistent. And today, we're going to talk about, I am devoted. And we'll finish out with generosity and faithfulness, and I am a finisher. So today's conversation, I need to put it around a caveat. We're going to talk about devotion and faith. Now, here's what usually happens, okay? If you're like a really conscientious person, you start to think about all the church you missed and how long it's been since you read the Bible and some of the things you're doing, and you just sit there and you stew and you feel bad. Or you get mad at me for talking about it, right? So this is not a space to go to. We're not talking about measuring yourself here, assessing are you good enough or not. Let's have an open-handed conversation about the power of devotion and the invitation to it. Don't spend the morning determining if you're devoted enough or not, or if you want to be. Spend the moment asking, what if? What if I was? What would it look like? How could it transform my life? And so speaking of devotion, what does it mean to be devoted to something? We do a few questions on a morning. It's a chance for you to meet the person sitting next to you if you haven't. Turn, and it's a chance to show off. You've probably been thinking all week, I wish someone would ask me what it means to be devoted to something. Well, here we go, all right? So you get about a minute, turn, chat about this, and then we'll be back. All right, hopefully you fired off some profound thing that the person next to you was like, oh, I needed to hear that this morning. But we're not done. We're doing back-to-back questions right now. The next question to mix this up is what is something you're devoted to? Now, this is church, so sometimes we end up going I got to choose some really deep, profound thing. Feel free to choose the low-hanging fruit. You could just be like, I'm super into this new series. There's 12 seasons. I've been binging. And just own that, because that's what you're doing right now. So what is something you are devoted to? Turn back to that person and let's share. All right. So we have an opportunity, and as I was preparing for this week and thinking about this series around pre-deciding, the conversation today happens in the middle of this series on purpose. This has been the most transformational statement and experience in my life. So obviously I bring that into the conversation. The idea of being devoted to someone or something. And not only that, though, I spend my life with people who are seeking freedom and healing and saying that the story they've lived is not the story they have to live and are hoping for something new, or just looking for community and a cause or purpose in a people. And it always comes back to this idea of devotion. Devotion's the linchpin that it kind of holds it all together and keeps it all intact. And so we're going to explore the conversation today. Remember, the goal is not to evaluate or assess whether you're devoted enough or whether you agree with the idea of devotion. It's to open-handedly go, what could this look like? So you're not going to judge yourself. You're not going to judge others, but we're going to let Jesus speak to us. So this is Jesus is speaking to his followers, and he notices that they're really worried and concerned about living. They find themselves in a situation where their priorities are inverted, and although it's a completely different time, and we're in antiquity when this is said, they find themselves thrashing. Am I free? Am I enough? Do I have what I need? What happens after this? They're wrestling with all these things. In particular, in this case, they're saying, well, what am I going to eat and what am I going to wear? Just a different, for most of you, that's not when you say what you're going to wear, it's like a closet question, not a do I have clothes today? That's their dynamic. Ours is different. Ours is different, and that's okay, but Jesus' wisdom is still timeless. Look at his statement. But seek first his kingdom. So priority, he's making a priority statement first. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Now, the foundation of Christianity is the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. It's the core belief in Christianity. And so we hold that core belief and we go, so what does the one who overcame death say about life? And Jesus in his life speaking, he says, well, there's going to be a priority. And if you invert it, you're going to find yourself thrashing. I'm just keep using that language all morning. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Now, you don't have to know what those things are. You can go find out what they are. That's the invitation. If I don't know what I'm looking for, I'm going to take a step back and go find out what it is I should be looking for. And then he goes on to say, all these things, this all-encompassing, the needs and desires of your heart and your life, they will be given to you as well. And I was like, how you could phrase this is, I will seek first the one who matters most. Unapologetically, we're prioritizing. I am devoted to Jesus. And that's the question behind the question of Christianity. That's the core. Like, if I'm devoted to Jesus, does that answer the questions of life? What's beautiful about it, and we'll get into this, is it's not be devoted to Jesus so you can experience, because that's how all contracts work. There's a mutual exchange of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours in some way. But when it comes to Jesus, it's covenantal. He says, I have established this relationship with you full stop. And when you experience that relationship, something flows out of you. You know what? I want to seek the one who's established that relationship with me, full stop. And I'm devoted to Jesus. I was thinking about the way, I think Augustine said this. Love God and do whatever you please. And I was having some conversations with people about this week. I said, what do you think this means? And it's amazing how intuitive they were. Almost everybody went to a relationship. They said, so if you're married, okay, this means like, love your spouse and do whatever you please, okay? What Augustine's getting at is, well, what are you going to do if you love your spouse? You're going to love your spouse and do whatever pleases them. You're not going to love your spouse and just selfishly pursue your own interests, desires, relationships. Augustine was getting at something. He was saying, you know what? Once you love God, whatever you please will be the very thing that pleases God. It's not going to be love God, that's enough, and now go live your life. And so I put this out there as something to reflect on for us today. I think he got at the core of every single thriving relationship you have in this life is building around this principle. Your love for that relationship produces a set of habits and practices that further fuel that relationship. And the relationships you have that have been broken or struggling or hurting, they're probably the inverse of this. The emphasis was put on doing whatever you please versus the love of the relationship. That was perfect. Well, okay, everybody, church is over. So here's what we're going to explore then. What does it mean to be devoted to Jesus? Let's take Augustine's practice. Let's take Jesus' words about seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And just answer the question, what does it mean to be devoted to Jesus, to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, to do as Jesus would do if he were you at work, not at work, at school, on a team, on a club, trying to sort out your relationships in your neighborhood, shopping at Albertsons or Fred Meyer, whatever it is, right? To be with Jesus, to be like Jesus, and to do what he would do if he were you. So we're going to start out by looking at right after the resurrection, the church was formed. People began to gather in a new way, and they gathered around new things, and they sort of like, if you're any Star Wars or Mandalorian fans, I was thinking about this, like this is the way. The idea that there's a way you're supposed to do everything. That concept is so true to the ecclesia or the gathering of the church. It was just like, this is the way. Why are you doing that? This is the way. Doesn't have to make sense to you. This is the way. I follow Jesus. That's why I deal with people this way. That's why I forgive the way I do. That's why I use my resources the way I do. This is the way. Well, here's the early church. Here's how their devotion is described. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. And just look at those words real quick. It's just an on-the-ground picture of what was going on when they got together, what was going on when they shared life. Now, it's part of a larger conversation, but we're just going to focus on this part of it right here, because it goes on to say they shared everything they had in common, and they took care of one another's needs. But look at the foundation of it. They devoted, so that's our word. They're followers of Jesus, and their devotion was listening to the apostles' teaching. And I just want to say this really clear. I'm not going to like twist this to go, and I'm the apostle, and you're here listening to my teaching. I'm talking about what the early church was doing. Listening to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, so sharing meals together, which would have included a time of communion, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. Let's just look at this word devotion as we talk about what does it mean to be devoted to Jesus. It's so just like in all languages, there's tenses to verbs. Some things are always ongoing. Some things have happened in the past. Some things are happening in the future. The tense on this verb it carries the idea of ongoing. So devoted conveys a strong sense of persistence and dedication. It's called the imperfect tense. It's called the imperfect tense because it's not yet done. It's imperfect. You have to every day keep doing it to lead it towards its perfection. But because it's the imperfect tense, it will never be complete. So that's the language that's used. They, with a strong sense of persistence and dedication, this is what the practices of their lives look like in community. They had a steadfast and continuous commitment to the apostles' teaching, fellowship, the breaking of bread, and prayer. What I love about this is sometimes faith can feel so mystifying. It can feel like, I don't know, it's like this the spirit in the sky, and there's me and my body here, and I don't know how to merge the two, and I know I love God, and I know I've encountered him at times in my life, and there's certain moments in my life out on a hike or when I gather in community or lighting a candle at Christmas Eve where like there's a transcendent moment. But this steers away from all of that and just goes, these were the tiny habits of their lives. The apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer. This was their devoted life, their ongoing and persistent practice. Now, just to note, so you can study around. So what are the apostles' teachings? In history and scholarship and theology have kind of tried to nail this down, and there's not a consensus because there wasn't like a list going around that said apostles' teaching, buy it at the college bookstore, way overpriced or whatever. So what happened here is it would focus on the life and teachings of Jesus. Guaranteed consensus. The apostles' teaching talked about Jesus, his life and his teachings, and how the Old Testament was to be understood through the reality of the life and teachings of Jesus. So that was going to be part of what they gathered to do. It's kind of like what we endeavor to do here when we gather on a Sunday. They would have spoke of the gospel message. What was the purpose of Jesus? His life, his death, the resurrection, the new life that came from that. There would have been regular moral and ethical instruction. And I love this because the assumption is that we kind of end up with our priorities inverted and thrashing around because of the ambiguity of moral and ethical living, something humanity and philosophy in particular has been trying to solve for all ages. Like, how do you live well? And so they said, well, let's look at how Jesus lived, and let's talk about Jesus' practices. And here's what's wild. Most of what you'll find is there's things like I could pick, two of us out, and we might really disagree on what it means to flourish. And the misconception would be that, so let's find a place. Jesus wants us to find a place in the middle. And I go, no. Jesus wants us to understand that the truth is in the extreme ends. Like, be the most loving and the most ethical. Be the most truth-based and the most gracious. Not some truth-based and some gracious. And so on that idea, they sat in the apostles' teachings and fellowship. Now, fellowship is what we experience here through life groups, through serving together, through some different teams that you're part of, or through gathering on a Sunday. It's a snapshot of it. It's probably not quite as robust as what those early followers of Jesus experienced. And you go down the list, the breaking of bread, sharing a meal together. The literal translation is chili cook kickoff. So make sure you sign up for the chili kickoff, right? And I see somewhere in the room, last year's winner's not here, but his parents are. One of our junior hires won last year. So seriously, step up your game, adults, okay? It was actually really good chili. And then prayers, practicing, communing with God, speaking with God. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I was thinking about this like single-minded, ongoing pursuit of Jesus and saying, okay, so what would it look like to say, I have pre-decided that I am devoted to Jesus. It's Sunday, so let's just look at my week, right? I've pre-decided I'm devoted to Jesus. The challenge is we're not left with like a demand. We're left with an opportunity. You can fill in these blanks, and you do fill in these blanks however you see fit. Sometimes in total isolation. Sometimes in the community you're part of. Sometimes through bloggers, podcasts, influencing people who speak to you. Sometimes just like you alone, you're like, this is what I do. And so they devoted themselves to blank, and they continually and passionately pursued blank. And I was thinking about this, and I was going, I'm not sure not being devoted and not pursuing is an option. The early church just prioritized devotion to Jesus and the continual and passionate pursuit of Jesus. So I was thinking about this. I was going, so what are some of the things we fill in? And these are just kind of standard, like meta categories, maybe not specific to you. But we might say they devoted themselves to comfort, and they continually and passionately pursued a life of ease. Now, I don't know if that's you, but if you think about the challenges of that, or you're probably regularly struck with boredom, because comfort is really hard to satisfy on a regular basis. It just doesn't have the purpose in it that it needs. And so they're struck with boredom, but also those that need them often feel let down by them. I needed you. I know it was going to cost you some time and some emotion, but you're so devoted to comfort that's how you begin to live your life. Maybe it's not comfort, it's go approval. They devoted themselves to approval, and they continually and passionately pursued the approval of others. I'm a person enough to know that all of us probably wrestle with that one. Like, slotting in the approval of others. And maybe here's one of the hardest things. The approval you're seeking from others is from someone who can't give it to you anymore. And so we're kind of locked into, like, usually parent relationships. And we're like, man, I just wish I could go back to 5th grade and I could show my dad who I've become. Like, and we end stuck in that. Now, that's a very real process we have to walk through, and it shapes who we are, all right? But the early Christians had this model of, like, their devotion was to these communal practices. And if you're devoted to approval, well, then your worst nightmare is like rejection, right? That someone would say, I do not approve of you. And so you can spend so much of your time and your work like living almost from a place of just being afraid of rejection. Or what if you're devoted to control? You may not think of this as something to be devoted to, but a lot of us, our upbringings led us to a place where control is the only way we feel safe, all right? So you're devoted to control, and they continually and passionately pursued like a highly competent, demanding life where they could execute their interests and desires on others, maybe vocationally, maybe in their home, in their family at Thanksgiving, whatever it was. And the challenge is the biggest threat for someone who's devoted to control is the ongoing anxiety that comes from wondering if you're going to get out of control. This always lingers right there. And people can often feel condemned and judged by you because of your devotion to control. So just a way to think about this. I hope, maybe do some self-assessment. Go and say, all right, what am I devoted to? And there's probably a lot of, you might be devoted to your book club. You might be devoted to growing your career. I'm not trying to knock those. I'm trying to say priorities. And so, we kicked off the series by talking about the idea that this little mark right here on this rope would represent your life, like 4,000 weeks roughly, 4,000 good weeks, okay? So this little, and then we said, but a conversation about like pre-deciding can't just be about this. It's not enough. Like, it will just fill us with anxiety to go, I'm getting older and I still haven't done all the things I'm supposed to do, and I'm gonna die soon, and the anxiety I'm gonna have to live my life with. And the invitation from Jesus is to go, the Bible's never talking about life in this like timestamp of 4,000 weeks. It's saying all of creation predates you. You're part of God's bigger story. And then your life comes along. And you have an opportunity to live your life in such a way that when your life ends, how you lived your life builds more of this ongoing story. Because other people will come. Other people will live their lives. And it's a picture that the whole pre-decision conversation, I think, has to happen in light of like eternity. There's more than just this life that we're aiming at, okay? So I want to break this down in a way that I was helpful for me. It might be helpful for you. But if you think about my week, and you think so we have those 4,000 weeks. Let's take one, okay? Think about my week or your week. We have 168 hours in a week. And so, because here's what I often, when I sit down with people and they go, I just want to grow in my faith, but I just don't have any time. And I told our volunteers, I was so mean to our volunteer team this morning. I didn't mean to be, but I said, I know we all feel like there's just no time. That is so categorically not true compared to the rest of history. Like, our time just gets filled with stuff, but we have more opportunity and more time. And if you disagree, let's chat about that. We have time. Here's what I mean. 168 hours in a week. But let's say you're really good at sleeping, which most of you aren't, okay? I'm a pretty good sleeper. That's my main spiritual gift. But most of you aren't great sleepers, but let's say on average, a good sleeper spends 56 hours of their week sleeping, all right? That's fantastic. That's good for you. It's good for the people around you. So part of your week, you say, yeah, but Carlos, I have to sleep. But we take it a step further. You also have to work or go to school. And so you'll spend roughly another 56, these are loose estimates. You'll spend roughly another 56 hours preparing for work, getting ready for work, commuting to work, going to school, studying, another 56 hours. That's a lot of our lives then. 168 hours, and we've used 112 of them sleeping and working, if we just timestamp ourselves in that. And then this is the part that frustrates me. I don't quite know what to do about. We talk about it a lot. The average American adult's spending roughly 17 hours a week on social media right now. And I was like, that's not true. And I opened up my Apple screen time. I was going to put a screenshot up there, and I'm like, I'm not doing that, because once they see that, this whole conversation's over. And I thought, how did it happen? Where did I do it? But 17 hours a week on social media. If you add your messaging in or pull it out, it changes. It goes up if you add your like sending messages in. The good news is, so I'm not removing that. That's a reality for many of us. The good news is we still have 39 hours left. 39 hours left in our week to do other stuff. 39 hours to work out and do some chores and cook some meals and make a few phone calls to people we need to help the kids with their homework. And so I started to think through this and go, so what would it look like to say I am devoted? And just bear with me for a moment on this. So I wanted to visually represent it. I cracked open my piggy bank and I actually had 168 quarters. I did not know I was rolling that deep. And I said, so this is what it looks like, a week in the life of you or me. I'm going to just do some rough estimation here, okay? So my week comes along, and I've got to do some sleeping. I'm a pretty good sleeper, okay? So I sleep. I still have a lot of life left. Now I love my job, all right? And so I get up, going to work. I think about it other times. I'm prepping, and so I go, all right, I'm going to put in a solid work week, okay? Right? And then I looked at my screen time. I got to own that, okay? I still have 39 hours left. All I want you to do is consider, have you put the barrier to say, I have no time, and too quickly moved on from it, versus assessing and reflecting on how we spend our lives. I'm a dad of 4 kids. They were younger once. They played sports. They moved around. So what happened is there was daily driving. Some of you know I'm 9 hours in. It's only Wednesday. Okay? Oh, good, it's Friday, but Saturday's sports. I have to sit there all day. Now, there's going to be some meals we're going to have, though. We're going to do some cooking and some cleaning. I'm going to be super generous to us and say that we love the kitchen. We spend a lot of time meal prepping and cooking and cleaning. There is still so much time. Now, what we haven't done yet is watched television, which I'm very good at. We haven't added to our screen time. There's also moments that arise. A water line breaks, spring's coming, you got to get out and you spend more time in the garden. And what happens is over time, we kind of, I'm going to say thoughtlessly, because we're not taking control of it, we walk through, welcome back, you guys. We thoughtlessly walk our way through, and then for some of us, and this is not a dig, for some of us, we get to this place and we're like, when it comes to my devotion to Jesus, I can squeeze in an hour. That might be you, it may not, but here's the challenge with that. You don't have to be like a habits guru to know that you really don't experience much in an hour. You just can't accomplish your goals in an hour. You can't grow your relationships in an hour. The dynamic is real and the challenge is there. So how do we be devoted? Well, we're going to step back and go, I got 168 hours. I'm going to do some reflection on that. But what's going to fill that time? Because it's not like make time and be religious. Like we're going to start church services every day of the week so you can spend more of your quarters here. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, well, I want to give you a visual. Because this is how Jesus, we're going to go to heart posture. This is how he talked about it. He gave, probably standing next to a vineyard. Many of his pictures of what life was like included things that people could see as they looked around. And he says this. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. So if you take your 168 hours and you put them in my hands, and you start with that, you remain in me, you let me work with you, guide you, direct you, you make it a process of spiritual living to do all of this with me. You remain in me, and I in you, you'll bear much fruit. Much fruit is the opposite of priority inversion and thrashing. Just listen to the sound of those. Priority inversion, thrashing, much fruit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, all of the things the scripture says are possible in your life and my life if we remain in the vine. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And as we wrap up, I was thinking about this. I got in trouble for clipping this off something in my house today. This is a sharp group of people. There's some passions in here, some pursuits in here. There's some physical accomplishments and trainings. There's some degrees in here. There's all sorts of stuff in here. You and I, like collectively, this branch has been removed from the vine. And if we pool our impressive resources and all turn our energy towards this producing fruit, nothing's going to happen. Let's do it just like 10 seconds. Collectively manifest this thing. Like go deep, like wish for your favorite fruit. I'll give you 10 seconds. Close your eyes. It might help you think harder. Go. I hope nothing shows up. Here's the thing. We could do that exercise over, and I know your heart wasn't in it, but we could do it over and over and over. And what Jesus is saying is you've got to be the branch and stay connected to the vine. He's so intent about this. We're going to go back one verse and play a game. Here's the verse, okay? Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can it bear fruit unless you remain in me. So there's one word that shows up more than other words in this. On a count of three, if you found it, call it out. 1, 2, 3. Remain. Yes, remain. The whole thing shows up over a dozen times in this little conversation Jesus has. And this word remain, it's just it just means this is like the best human stuff. Abide, live, dwell. Jesus is giving an invitation to say, look, we're all going to attach our branch to some vine. And we're gonna think it's gonna bear fruit. But the branch is meant to be in the vine of Jesus Christ. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all these things will be given to you. And so I end you with this, and we'll sing a song to reflect on and close. Your practice. I'd love for you to write these down, put them in a note, take a picture of this, because this is where the conversation about the 168 weeks comes to be. Pre-decide a time, pre-decide a place, and pre-decide a plan. Sit these three things down in front of you and go, what's my week going to look like? Because if you don't prioritize habits and practices that will draw you into devotion with Jesus, it will be all that's left at the end, and you have no time. And you end up with priority inversion and thrashing. And in their worst form, they don't only hurt you, they hurt the people around you. Pre-decide a time, pre-decide a place, pre-decide a plan. I'm not formulaic enough to say, like, you got to sit in this certain chair and read this translation of the Bible and listen. Some of you grew up in that model, go for it. It's never really totally worked for me. But I do have to look at my week and go, what are my pre-decisions going to be? Right now, I'm almost like 20 days into a New Testament Bible reading plan that some of you are doing with me. I got behind. And I was like, darn it. So I went for a long walk and I caught up. I'm like, I pre-decided I'm going to do this. Maybe it's before the kids get up. Maybe it's before your roommate gets home from work. Maybe it's before you go home, because you know if you live alone, you work all day and then you go home and you find yourself wildly distracted and unproductive. So maybe it's before you do that. You stop somewhere, the same place, and you pre-decide. Pre-decide a place. Is it a certain chair? Is it the front porch? Is it when the sun's coming up or coming down so you can watch it? Is it the bath? I want to throw that out there. You get a lot done, like especially your social media, in the bathroom. You could pre-decide to make that like your Bible reading place or something. That sounds so churchy to me to say, but it's not a bad idea, okay? The throne. Thank you for that. Maybe it's your commute. Maybe it's like on my commute, I'm going to practice solitude. I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to just, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to listen. I'm going to talk to God. I'm going to listen to God. I want to share. So this idea has been around the church since the very beginning. And over in the Middle Ages, it took on the form of what was called a rule of life, or a common rule. And some of you know what this is through different therapy or coaching that you've had. And a rule of life is fundamentally like I've determined in advance what the rule of my day-to-day living, what I'm going to do with my 168 hours. And it's not supposed to be aspirational, but if you saw my rule of life, it is so, I should be so good at guitar. Well, I'm horrible at it because I never practice. But on my rule of life, it's like play guitar daily because you love it. Maybe I don't love it, or I don't know, maybe I watch too much TV. I don't know. So what I want to do is give you some daily and weekly things to consider as you leave today, to consider what I am devoted to Jesus. I am the branch that's connected to the vine. I will seek first the kingdom of God. I will love God and do whatever I please, because that love of God will compel me to do whatever he calls me to do. And what I please will be what he pleases. And so here's some ideas that you could put into a common practice. Maybe you do these already, maybe you never have. So I want to be really intense with the first one. Not just praying 3 times a day, but kneeling in prayer. We are embodied physically, and our faith should be engaged in our physical life. Kneeling prayer 3 times a day. 1 meal with others. My family looked at me last night after dinner. I'm like, thank you all for sharing this meal with me. I am committed to having daily conversation with people. They're like, dude, we live in your house and you cooked the food and said we had to come to the table. But this is what I want. I don't want my family to scatter. 1 meal with others. Daily practice. Who can you share a meal with? Not on your device. Not sitting alone listening to a book. In conversation, eye to eye. Who can that be? 1 hour with your phone off. I know that sounds wild. When you're sleeping, it doesn't count. 1 hour where you go, this is the hour I turn my phone off and I do something else. I learn how to live without it, informing my living. Scripture before phone. Some of you need this because your phone's right by your bed. You wake up and the first thing you see is your notifications and your work emails and your updates and your news feeds. You are positioning yourself for thrashing and priority inversion all day long. Scripture before phone, before you jump into the phone, spend a moment allowing the apostles' teaching to speak to you, to prepare your heart. These are daily habits. Weekly suggestions. Every week, 1 hour of conversation with a friend. Book it in your schedule. I'm going to sit down and catch up with them. If you did this every week, you would have 52 meaningful hours of conversations with people in your life this year. That's a lot. Prepared, meaningful. The discipline here is loving God and loving others, right? Curate your media to 4 hours. I don't know how to do this. The deck is stacked against us. But the win and the opportunity is huge. At least have the conversation. How could I curate my media to 4 hours in this week? And if you do, you will get back so many more hours. Fast from something for 24 hours. What if every week you took something off the table in your life? Said, no phone, no Instagram, no TikTok. I'm not eating today. I'm not going to watch TV. Today, you might even go, I'm going to fast from worry. Because worry is just like, every day, me and worry are hanging out. So today, I'm going to go, just not today. No. The next 6 days, we'll get our game on. But not today. Fast from something for 24 hours. And Sabbath observance. And this is, I think I've maybe shared with you, I've never preached a sermon series on Sabbath because you would just feel the hypocrisy oozing out of me. And God's been working on me a ton on this. He's going, man, you have got, like I've given you this gift of rest, and you keep making something else out of it. And so, 4 weekly habits, 4 daily habits, something to think about. Yours might be different, but what I want to invite you to as we finish this Pre-Decide series over the next 3 weeks is to reflect on tiny habits that produce in me greater devotion to the one who loves me, the one who leads me, the one who's given it all for me, and the one who's with me on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's not because I'm giving to him, he's giving to me. It's because he loves me so much, I just want to dwell in that vine. It's the only place you're going to find that, to that degree. So, as our band comes up, I'll give you a moment to reflect on the words of Jesus. I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you'll bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Are you experiencing priority inversion daily? Do you find yourself thrashing? The remedy's right here.